Almost every single musician has their own sound. Y Isaac has indie rock, ENT has flemcore, and if you don't, you're just a covers artist. That's unnecessarily harsh. But recently I've been thinking about categorising my own sound, and maybe you can use it to make your own. Across the 24 different recordings that I've released in the past year and a half, there seems to be 4 distinct categories that my songs fall into. You have your rock music without distortion, except for the one track that does. You have the acoustic sound with piano, sometimes paired with drums, and when I mean sometime, I mean an entire EP's worth. And you have the songs that started life on a digital audio workstation. They mainly use synthesizers, but not always. And with some of these, they play hard and loose about which categories they fit into, and tend to lend itself from other styles. Ignore the Image and Bed song featuring Y Isaac are kind of 2 prime examples of this, as they take more of the rockier style and can easily be used with electric guitar. And so from this, I'm going to choose one song from each of the categories that kind of epitomises what that genre feels like. Let's start with the rock sound. While Saving Grace has a far richer sound with the acoustic guitar and piano, I think Leave It Behind sums up the style a lot better with the omission of that. This track features all of the instruments that were made famous by the Rock Band games. You have electric guitar that play the chords, you have the bass guitar that follows and reinforces that, the drums that add an interesting rhythm that goes more behind it, and the vocals to wrap it all up. The guitar very much leads these songs, which is why Ignore the Image and Bed song from Effigy Memory feel like they borrow a lot from this category, even though they're acoustic. For all of the songs in these categories, I've used the Fender Stratocaster in Cherry Red. Mine's actually a Mexican-made Strat from 2013, so it is cheaper than its American-made counterparts. And again, for all of these songs, I would have used either the Marshall Code 50 or the Vox AC10. I can't exactly remember which one I did with which, because it was a long time ago, but it would have been either of those 2 amps. And whilst this video is mentioning about my recorded sound, it's a good point to talk about my live setup. Back when I was able to do gigs, I would use the Marshall Code because it has a lot more power than the Vox amp. The Vox is good for recording, but it doesn't nearly fill a room like the Marshall can. And alongside that, I would use a pedal board, giving different effects to my guitar. The first pedal on the board is the Electro Harmonics Mono Synth. This pedal is used seldom, but it needs to go first, otherwise it messes up all of the other effects. Next in the chain is the Caverns Delay Reverb V2 by Keeley Electronics. It's the main pedal that lets used because reverb just is needed on guitar. I'm not going to stress about how much reverb is needed on stuff. You need reverb. You need reverb. That's probably how messed up the audio. Next is the Marshall JH1, nicknamed the Jackhammer. Now, some of you who are more into guitars and pedals might be asking why a distortion pedal is after a reverb pedal. And you'd be right, and I have no answer for why. Finally, the last pedal on the board is the Boss RC30 Loop Station. It's the pedal that gets used most next to the reverb pedal and is what Keeping the Status Quo was first written on. But back to Leave It Behind. The bass guitar that I use is a bit of an oddity, as it was a build-your-own bass kit that my dad bought. Imagine IKEA, but if it was for instruments, but also the IKEA was only in Australia, and you lived in the UK, and you had to wait 2 weeks for it to be cleared through customs. But if you want an approximation, you might as well get a Hofner violin bass, as it was basically that in flat pack form. The drums are also something that's a little weird to pin down. It was just really the drum kit that was available at my college, and I can't for the life of me remember what manufacturers did what parts of the drum kit. And it's also not consistent between the recordings, because between EP1 and Album 1 and EP2 they changed 3 times, from a bad, quite worn out drum kit to a brand new drum kit that was not super expensive to Logic's built-in MIDI plugin. But the one element that has stayed consistent is the vocals. For my vocals I use an Ashton Origin, and for its price it is a shockingly good microphone for vocals. And not just vocals, almost every single voiceover I've done since May 2019 has been done on the Ashton Origin. Now if you recall my short-lived series Road to Release, you remember I didn't have that microphone when recording higher grade. And you'd be right, but let's ignore the fact that I used the microphone at college, which was the Rode NT2, and the redone cover of Flag Day where I used the Skelvin BM800, and any live performances I've done where I've used the Audio-Technica AT 2010. Yeah, so as I said, I've used the Ashton Origin on every recording I've done. Finding the definitive song for the acoustic sound is a lot harder, as there is a lot more differences between each of the recordings. But ultimately, I think the definitive sound is Before the Departure. Thought I was going to pull a higher grade on you, didn't ya? My reasoning for this is the fact that it uses piano and acoustic guitar alongside MIDI drums and bass. Whilst I could have gone with higher grade, I think Before the Departure more shows the calmer sound that goes better with the acoustic sound. And especially with the album version of higher grade, its more rockier sound during the bridge kind of pushes it more towards that genre. It was only as editing that I realised I didn't mention what sort of make of acoustic guitar that I used. So when it came to the recordings I've done with acoustic guitar, almost all of them have been using the Yamaha APX 700 Mark II. It's more of an electric guitar styled acoustic guitar, so it has a slimmer body and doesn't sound as good when it's done acoustically, but does it sound amazing when it's plugged in. Another recent guitar that I've been using is a similar one to the APX 700 Mark II, but is more of a travel-sized guitar, so it has a smaller body with a full-size neck. Alright, back to the video. But as it has a piano, I can talk about how that was recorded, which would be good if I could remember how it was recorded. It was kind of just the piano that I had at college, and again with a stereo pair of microphones put over them. Can't remember the microphones, can't remember the piano, so this is a good job on my part. Anyway, most of the elements are shared with the rockier style, especially when it comes to mixing. But when it comes to the bass, that's kind of the only real difference, because I don't use a plectrum when playing. A lot of bass guitar purists will call it sacrilege that I use a plectrum when it comes to a rockier sound, but it just makes it a lot easier, and I'm not a bass player, I'm a guitarist, so you can go and do something. And at the end of the day, there was nobody who can play bass on my music course, so I just recorded the bass myself, which is why it's not very good. But as we shift over to the amalgam style of rock and acoustic that we see in Ignore the Image, you can see it very much burrowing from different elements. When it's combined, you have the acoustic sound of the guitar, but it's also combined with the drums, but at the same time opting to use the calmer, more methodical playing of the bass guitar rather than using the plectrum like on its rockier cousins. There isn't really anything to say on this style because it's all just sort of a bit of an amalgam of the other two genres that have been mentioned. And the final category is an interesting one to talk about because all of these songs were originally conceived on digital audio workstations, in my case Logic. And I think the track to best showcase this is 2008, because it uses the synthesizers that are just kind of commonplace when it comes to digital audio workstations, but also uses live instruments, something that something like a Raise just doesn't do. And in all of these songs, aside from We're All Two, they all feature MIDI drums, typically Logic's drummer. This is something that just handles MIDI drums for you. You just dial in the parameters and it just creates a drum groove. It's something that was very heavily used on the second EP, because I couldn't have access to live drums. And at the same time, it also gives quite a lot of flexibilities between different genres and different sounds. So, to sum up, my rock style is just electric guitar, bass guitar, drums and vocals, and can be used in any power trio or rock band without any problem. My acoustic songs feature an acoustic guitar, a calmer playing for the bass guitar, and sometimes includes piano and percussion. Effigy Memory is a strange and confusing mix that uses Logic's drummer plugin, and is basically the same plugin that is used on almost every song started on a door, except for We're All Two, because it's very versatile when it comes to lots of different genres. Unless it's jazz and metal, then you're kind of out of luck. So this is now the second time that I've been on video when it comes to doing these stuff. Still getting used to doing it all. Don't necessarily like how sort of grainy it looks. Can't really do much about that because I'm just recording on my MacBook in my uni room. This outro has already been derailed. But yeah, like, don't really know what else to say with this video. I'm potentially going to be putting up some more bedroom acoustic style songs on my Instagram, maybe on YouTube if they're not covers, but stick around for them. I might have new songs at some point soon, just slowly working through material and having to work on new songs with my course. So I don't really know what else to say, just thank you for supporting me during this time, thank you for streaming. I don't really get loads of money from streaming, but whatever. Thank you for streaming my thank you for streaming my music. And just, yeah, thanks for sticking around, thanks for watching this video, hope you enjoyed it. I still don't have an outro, I'll come up with one in the future.